Traditionally, there have been two ways that crowds take part in law enforcement investigations. Top-down investigations that are led by law enforcement officials, and bottom-up investigations led by members of the public. Top-down investigations, where law enforcement asks for tips from the public, have existed since at least the 1850s in the form of wanted posters and even TV shows such as America's Most Wanted, which has claimed responsibility for over 1,000 arrests. Today, such calls for help exist on websites and social media. While the format of these requests has changed over time, the actual requests themselves haven't. Law enforcement officials control who to investigate and what lines of inquiry to follow, and the public's contribution is limited to providing raw data and information flows one way. Simultaneously, social networking sites and investigative tools like Google Maps have enabled bottom-up crowdsourced investigations that are run by members of the general public, with no oversight by professionals. For example, TikTok has allowed crowds to post hundreds of videos investigating the disappearance of Gabby Petito. These videos have amassed over 1.4 billion views, fueled by TikTok's content ranking algorithm. While some bottom-up investigations have been successful, such as identifying and catching criminals, they're probably better known for their high-profile failures involving vigilantism and doxing, such as during the 2013 Boston Marathon bombing or the 2020 George Floyd protests. Despite this criticism, crowdsourced investigations continue to flourish and evolve. So, how can we make crowdsourced investigations more effective and ethical? For the rest of this presentation, I'm going to describe our ethnographic study of CrowdSolve, a crowdsourcing event that investigated 2 decades-old unsolved cold cases. CrowdSolve represents a third, unique model that we call expert-led crowdsourcing, which blends top-down guidance by law enforcement experts with bottom-up participation of a crowd of over 250 amateur sleuths. Now, before I dive into our findings, let me describe the event and how we became involved in it. A month before CrowdSolve, the event organizers reached out to us for advice on how to best leverage the efforts of over 250 attendees because of our prior work in crowdsourced investigations. Now, given the limited time and privacy concerns about digitizing real case files, the organizers implemented only one of our suggestions, which was giving attendees specific and actionable sense-making tasks. The event itself was spread over 3.5 days and involved investigating 2 unsolved cold cases, the disappearance of Nancy Moyer and the murder of Karen Bodine. At the end of the event, the law enforcement experts, including the lead detective on the 2 cases, provided an overview of the case and presented the evidence found. Then, the 250 attendees were split into 3 working groups, led by experts who each focused on one aspect of the case, such as perpetrator profiles, suspect statements, and the autopsy report. Each group was split further into smaller teams of 8 to 10, where teams answered questions that the experts had identified as being potentially useful to the lead detective, such as, is there anything that may give you clues about her, the victim's state of mind, or her plans for the weekend? Finally, they recruited professional facilitators to synthesize the results into a report that was handed over to the police department. So as for methods, we used Lee and colleagues' lens of human infrastructure to magnify the social conditions and activities that led to the emergence of CrowdSolve. In doing so, we found 3 overarching and interrelated tensions that must be managed for expert-led crowdsourced investigations to be both effective and ethical. The first tension is between the control of the experts organizing the event and the crowd of true crime fans who are eager to participate in it but may not know how to contribute. So, organizing CrowdSolve required considerable effort from the organizers and the experts. This included making sure everyone wanted to participate. The detectives in charge of the 2 cases, the experts with relevant expertise, the victims' families, and the attendees. Then the organizers spent almost 400 hours curating hundreds, if not thousands of pages of interviews, reports, and photos, so that attendees could easily make sense of the case files and generate useful insights. We also found that the experts' time and attention was spread thin, and as a result, many teams worked in an unstructured manner or veered off topic. Despite this, we found that the experts helped attendees learn and generate useful leads. For example, one participant said, having an expert meant that you can just bounce ideas off of them. They really get it because it's their field, and they're bouncing ideas back. The detective in charge of the case also told us how somebody pointed out a paint database, and they can do some spectrometry on one of the paint flakes that we've collected in this case, and possibly tell me the make and model of the car. The second tension is between security and privacy versus openness. On the one hand, opening up the cases and sharing as much information as possible with attendees would simultaneously maximize the chances of discovering new leads and facilitate an immersive true crime experience. On the other hand, the organizers also had to weigh the privacy considerations of the victims and their families, as well as law enforcement's desire to maintain a viable legal case. Most notable was the organizers' decision to physically hand out printed case files instead of digital ones to decrease the likelihood of leaks. Attendees still use technology, however. Some teams use software like Google Earth and Google Docs to synthesize their results, and may have made them more effective at generating useful leads. Still, attendees were careful with how they use technology. One participant said, "We were using Google Docs and realized maybe that's not secure, so we were trying to figure out how to compile information properly other than just sticky notes. And the best that we came up with was just like an Excel spreadsheet that we could print." The organizers also fostered social norms for appropriate behavior by expressly telling attendees not to engage in vigilantism. However, some norms weren't embraced by all attendees or weren't clearly set. For example, a small number of attendees visited crime scenes and local libraries to conduct more research. Overall, this low-tech approach was largely successful in achieving one of the organizers and the lead detective's goals for the event. To the best of our knowledge, no information has been leaked. The third tension is between the entertainment aspect of the event and the reality of the murders and their real-world consequences. We found that attendees' enthusiasm led to invested participation, but it occasionally bordered on fetishization. For instance, when experts displayed images or described gruesome details in the sessions, we noticed attendees glancing at the families to gauge their reactions. Though problematic, this behavior was less severe compared to other fandom communities, where perpetrators are often obsessed over and even sexualized, such as through fan fictions. In turn, one attendee asked, "What kind of social dynamic do we have here, both in the room and then outside, with the family?" We also found that the family's presence strongly motivated attendees to work hard, and that attendees were able to glean valuable information from the families. So these are the three tensions we found. Where do we go from here? Well, to minimize the risks of inappropriate or unwanted behavior, we found that the CrowdSolve organizers used 4 regulation mechanisms that closely match Lawrence Lessig's new Chicago school theory, which is also actually called the pathetic dot theory. Lessig's theory posits that human behavior can be regulated in 4 ways: through laws, norms, markets, and architecture. Similarly, at CrowdSolve, the organizers used legally binding non-disclosure agreements to ensure information wasn't. Second, they fostered appropriate social norms by instructing attendees to not engage in vigilantism. Third, the cost of attendance was hundreds of dollars that caused those who were willing to pay the fee to feel more invested emotionally and financially, and it raised the barrier for entry for nefarious actors. Fourth, the organizers intentionally limited the use of technology, negatively affecting collaboration, but also preventing information from being leaked. Further, we found that making crowdsourced investigations effective and ethical requires carefully designing the entire initiative. This includes choosing which cases to focus on, deciding who is involved, what information to share and how, designing microtasks, and finally, synthesizing the large volume of results into a format that is useful for end users. More broadly, expert-led crowdsourcing can benefit other types of investigations that need flexibility and rapid scaling up of expertise. For instance, rapidly developing crises may make it infeasible to design complex crowdsourcing platforms, or expertise may be limited. Experts can train and guide novice crowds in a synchronous setting and design microtasks to enable novices to easily scale up investigations. In conclusion, crowdsourced investigations can be incredibly powerful and can be made even more effective and ethical when led and carefully designed by experts. I'd love to hear any thoughts or ideas that you'd like to share. Here's my contact information. Thank you.